Hey guys, Scare9 here, welcome back to my channel today, and in this video, I've got something special for you guys. We just recently broke 10,000 subscribers. It took me a while to decide what I was going to do, but I've decided that we're going to be talking about what makes the raids great and ranking them all. And to join me today, I am joined by one of my favorite YouTubers of all time, Mr. Datto. How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well, my man, and it's very nice of you to say, by the way.
Yeah, so just going back, we have met, I don't know if you remember this, we actually met at the Destiny 2 reveal event, and we talked for a bit, and just actually about raiding, I believe, and so it just gave me this idea. Raiding, we're obviously, I think that you like raiding, I love raiding,
Yep.
and that kind of leads into my first thing. So why raiding? Why does an activity like the raid appeal to players like us? Like, why are we not like Trials of Osiris gurus or whatever? Why do we like to focus on super end game heavy, difficult mechanic activities like the raid? So why do you like the raid so much?
For me, it stemmed from playing World of Warcraft very early on in just like my gaming life. It was the first game that I really got incredibly invested into, and back then, World of Warcraft PvP mainly consisted of trying to find a team to grind for like 16 hours every single day so that you could try to reach like High Warlord or Grand Marshal or something. And as a 15, 16, 17-year-old, you don't really have that kind of time. I mean, I guess you do, but like you have school and stuff, so you
Yeah.
can't really do that. So the other option was raiding. And at the time, you got the best gear in the game to beat up on kids from the raids. So that's why I really liked doing the raids. Partly to gear up, but partly because it was just insanity when I first started raiding with 40 people. And from then the raids got more complicated and more in depth, and they just kept getting better and better and better. And I really liked it. I really liked raiding. I liked just everything about it. Execution, trying to always be a better damage dealer or a better healer or a better tank, and all that. So I don't know, it just really, really appealed to me, and that's kind of taken me into any other sort of raid-like experience that I've had in any other video game.
Right. And that's actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. That's actually like my favorite aspect of raiding too, is getting the perfection down, doing the most damage that you can, one facing a boss if possible, doing a raid like Crota's End in, 12 minutes or whatever. That's what I like about it. It's more of the challenge aspect. I really love like difficult mechanics. And whenever you can say that you've mastered some of the most difficult mechanics in the entire series, I think that's so cool. That's what I love personally about raiding.
Yeah.
So yeah, so going into that, obviously, the end bosses of raids typically have the most difficult in-depth mechanics, but I think it's also very important to look up at the encounters leading up to the final boss as well. And obviously, some raids have better lead-up mechanics than other ones. So I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on, do you like longer raids with more encounters leading up to it? Do you like more mini-boss encounters? Do you like more puzzly type encounters? Because I know, like, for instance, Destiny 2 is severely lacking in mini-bosses. Neither of the two raids have anything. Well, the dogs kind of, but not really. So do you like more mechanic heavy or kind of like bullet sponge heavy encounters? And how many would you generally like in a raid?
Before we get into that, what do you consider a mini boss?
So yeah, that's what I guess you kind of run into the things like the dogs, where it's kind of like a DPS check. I'm thinking like a single target, sort of like War Priest or Golgoroth, where there might be mechanics to take down a shield or to make them weak or whatever. But essentially, it's an NPC that you have to fight with their own mechanics, and they essentially fight back. It's not just like a floating scion while you're running around.
Okay, so basically like a boss that's not the final boss.
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
Okay, fine. Okay. Sorry, what was the question again?
So
Before
how
I
many?
diverted us?
Yeah, sorry, no, it's fine. How many do you like? Do you like more mini boss or mechanic
Right.
heavy? Like, would you prefer like a Golgoroth or a Gauntlet type encounter, or a mixture, and how many, and that kind of thing?
I would prefer a nice mix of both. Destiny basically sort of alternates between puzzle heavy and action heavy raids, right? We even had that with Leviathan. Leviathan was very puzzle heavy, and then the raid layer was not puzzle heavy at all. It was mainly action based, and there's merits to both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Puzzle heavy gives you a very good first time experience or at least to me, a very good first time experience, because part of figuring out the raid encounter is that's fun. That's fun to me. Whereas with something like Argos, not too much of a puzzle. It's not terribly difficult to figure out, but the execution part is the thing that you're going to be doing way more often. And if you can have a fun fight that has a just how am I trying to word this? If you have a puzzle heavy encounter, it's gonna be fun the first couple of times, and then every other time is just gonna be like, whatever. But if you have a good execution based fight or an action fight, as long as it's done really well, it's fun almost every time, right? That's why Argos is really liked. That's why Axis is really liked, because they're action oriented encounters, a little bit of mechanics, but very action oriented, and they were fun every time.
Exactly.
So,
And I actually really like that explanation. And that's something like, I feel like the Leviathan, to my clan personally, hasn't held up as well as I would have liked it to. Because even though the encounters are a lot of fun and some of the most unique encounters we've ever seen, I feel like there's some things like the specifically Callus himself, after a while it just becomes a little bit tedious, in my opinion. Like maybe if you get to like the final phase and you're about to kill him or whatever, and then someone dies, and obviously the Leviathan has a lot of mechanics, like if you screw anything up, that's an immediate wipe. I feel like it just becomes more tedious than fun. So I totally agree with what you said there.
yeah, I can see that. Leviathan, at least on normal mode at this point, is just kind of a steamroll, at least for my group. I
Exactly.
understand that's not for everybody, but that's a result of a puzzle heavy raid. The first couple of times through, when you're trying to figure everything out and figure out how everything works, it's really fun. It's really engaging. But then after that, you're steamrolling it. Baths is a 3-minute encounter at the most. Like you can just turn off your brain, right? It's not as engaging. But you always want that first time experience to be really, really good. So I understand sort of the issue of, should we do a lot of puzzles? Should we do a lot of action?
Right.
If
Do you
they
think
can ever
it's
get a nice mix of both, that's the ideal.
Yeah, and one thing that I've been noticing, like while preparing for this, is the action heavy ones tend to be shorter. Like why do you think Bungie hasn't made an account or a raid the size of, let's say, something like King's Fall that's more action oriented than puzzle oriented?
Well, if there's one thing I've learned from the more casual audience, it's that they don't really get the time to do a lot of raiding, and I still have this problem where I think like, oh, just because I'm doing it doesn't mean everybody else is doing it as easily. But King's Fall, I think, is the hardest of all of the raids. It's definitely the longest, and I think it is the most difficult of all of them. And I think I honestly don't know why. It could be resources, it could be scope, it could be just the pure design of what they want to do. I feel like we could see something like a King's Fall come back again, and I would love to see that, because I really enjoy King's Fall, although for different reasons than I enjoy other stuff. But I think it could be a whole variety of reasons. Maybe they got a lot of feedback from players like, hey, this is too hard. It's too lengthy. We can't get through it. It could be a variety, anything really.
Right. And I think it's interesting. To me, at least, I think the shorter raids actually have more replayability. But that I'm not sure if that stems from the length or from those being typically the action-oriented ones. Like if you think towards the shorter raids being Eater of Worlds, Vault of Glass, Crota's End, those are all three fairly action-heavy, I would say. Crota's End is more, it's kind of half and half. But so do you think that, what do you think the main source of replayability is going to be? Do you think it's going to be the length of the raid? Do you think it's going to be the how mechanic heavy that raid is, the length of the encounters, how rewarding it is? What do you think?
Honestly, I think it comes down to how rewarding it is. Mainly that, and then also if it's fun to do. If the raid is not particularly fun, I don't think you're going to get anybody running it. Luckily, Bungie has not had that problem, because all of the raids have been fantastic. The basically, the one shining thing about Destiny has been the raids. Yeah, it's down to rewards. It's down to fun factor. I don't think really having a specific mechanic really impacts how much I want to or don't want to run a raid. Unless, we had like a raid layer situation where I just didn't really like the one boss that was in there and be like, all right, screw it. Yeah, I think it comes down to rewards and how much fun people are having doing it. And
Right.
I think definitely the rewards part needs to be improved. And I guess, people were not too hot on Leviathan. I think people liked the raid layer a little bit more than Leviathan. Although it's kind of tough to compare the two because they're going for two very different experiences. And I guess people don't really find Leviathan as fun, so they're not going to run it, combined with the not as rewarding raid reward situation goes, at least compared to previous raids.
Yeah, right. So that's actually something I thought was really interesting about the Leviathan is actually as my team started to do it more, I actually started to appreciate it even more. And now it's gotten to a point, obviously, we kind of fell off because we did get all the rewards and it's hard to get a full group a lot of the time. But I still really appreciate the Leviathan for what it is. But I totally see, especially with like the prestige mode for the Leviathan, in my opinion, is much more difficult than like heroic modes were in Destiny 1. I don't know if it's just they made the ads way harder. I don't know if it's a personal problem like with my group. Did your team have any difficulty with prestige mode? Like trying that transition seemed to be a lot more of a large jump in my opinion.
The first couple of times we struggled, and if we are not properly equipped with the knowledge, I'll just put it this way: if we don't have an anchor on our team, we're fine. But the first couple of times were a little bit rough. I do think that the gauntlets not really drastically changed. Obviously, things are much harder to kill in the prestige mode because things are actually scaled exactly to your level. You're not just several tens of levels above everything else.
Right.
So I think that's part of it. I think the Bats encounter suffers from the new weapon situation where you only have one sort of power weapon, and it relies heavily, very, very heavily on having power ammo at full for every single attempt. Otherwise, you shouldn't even bother because the majors that spawn are very brutal to kill.
Exactly. And that type of... Here, you go ahead. My bad.
No. I was like, and dogs is like they added 2 more dogs, but they don't have any more health. I think the dogs encounter was a good way of beefing up the prestige mode, where you need to be more knowledgeable about the encounter, but things don't really have a ton more health. Like the beast handlers do, but they're not really that influential on the encounter unless you're really, really, really not paying attention. Yeah, and then just otherwise. But how do you make something harder without like changing the mechanics of an encounter? Which
exactly.
Is Bungie has not really done a ton of historically. And just raise everything's power.
And that's actually, I was going to bring up the dogs thing, because I feel like with Leviathan Prestige, there were 2 encounters done really well, that being Callus and the dogs. Both had those extra mechanics thrown in. I think it made it a really refreshing experience, made it a lot more hectic, especially in the Callus one where everyone's being teleported in and out, and I really like that. But the thing that I don't like about the Baths is essentially all they did, or all it feels like to me, and you brought this up too, is they made the enemies harder. And I feel like in the Baths, like if you don't kill all the lanterns in one try on Prestige mode, you should probably just wipe and try again. Because it's at that point, you're not going to have any power ammo because you just dumped them all into the lanterns, or, and so I feel like if they would have made the lanterns have more health and forced you to go an extra round, but kept the enemies a little bit, make them a little bit stronger, but not where they are right now, and force you to go an extra round where you had to go to a specific plate, because that mechanic got added, but right. if you're only doing it in one phase, you're not really utilizing that mechanic.
You don't even know.
Exactly. So forcing you to utilize that mechanic but also making it possible for you to survive more than one phase. I feel like that would have been a great prestige, encounter. I felt like I just feel like bats went from something like a kind of joke, teaching people the Leviathan. It's like, oh, this is an easy one. It's just like totems in King's Fall. To being like, yeah, you pretty much just want to hide in a corner if you don't know what you're doing here. So I thought that was really interesting.
I agree and disagree. I don't think artificially extending the length of an encounter just to do it to make it seem harder is necessarily the right thing to do. That's why a lot of people didn't like, for example, Oryx, or by extension, like the Gauntlet, or in my case, the Oracles during Vault of Glass 1.0. You can't do anything to make it go faster. Your skill is capped, basically, and people don't like having their skill capped. If you are able to go faster, if you have the power, if you have the knowledge, you should be able to go faster. And I think just artificially lengthening the Bats encounter, maybe not the best design choice, because it doesn't promote any sort of prowess if you're forced to do two. Yeah.
No. That's actually, this is why I love conversations like this, because that's actually like my biggest complaint. We're going to get into this when we rank the raids, is I hate the Oryx encounter because of that. And I even, just talking about suggesting that change to the Bath encounter, I didn't even think like that you could compare to the two. So it's a really good way to point that out. And now I totally agree. So maybe implement it somewhere in the middle where you had to switch to a specific plate, instead of having the two side rotation. Maybe when you ran through the middle, you saw a logo and then you had to go to that plate next or something like that. But I totally agree
that would be interesting. That would be a lot more interesting than just artificially like, yeah, the vials have like 3 times the health, so have fun. Like that to me would just not be a fun encounter. Right. Just making me do it longer.
No, I agree with that. I didn't think it all the way through. That's a pretty good. See, like I said, I love discussions for this reason. And this actually kind of, we've talked about the highlights, pretty much the lows of the Destiny raids. What's something that you want to see in the future of raiding? We have the new raid layer coming up. Is there anything specific that you hope that it has, or shows the community a new type of mechanic, or what do you personally hope gets implemented in the future?
I get this question asked a lot. And I never really have an answer, because to me, it just doesn't matter as much. The only thing I really care about is the raid fun? Is it engaging? Is it going to keep my interest? And if the answer is yes, I don't even really care what they do. I would say, I don't know. Like, I really wouldn't mind seeing more of a King's Fall-like raid experience. Obviously, that's not going to be in the raid layer. That would be something for September, or whenever the next release is coming, which I assume is September. But I don't really have any like specific demands. Obviously, I do have some specific demands, but it's not in line with what Bungie wants to do for their raids, right? Because they don't want people to have to bring a certain class in order to do a certain encounter. Which is noble. That's very noble. But by doing that, they severely limit themselves with what kind of mechanics and sort of fight like layouts that they can do, because they know that like, oh, well, not every single team is going to have a Ward of Dawn, so we can't have a thing where everyone's got to hide in a Ward of Dawn from an AoE attack. But they could implement some sort of, lever that produces a similar effect. But yeah, I don't know. They've self-imposed limits on their own design, and there's only so much you can do with that limitation in mind. So, and any ideas that I have sort of need to have that limitation repealed, or at least Bungie needs to free up some other design limitations that they self-impose. But I don't know. I've never been able to answer the question, just because they've been doing such a good job already in general that to me it's just like, what? Surprise me. You've been killing it so far. Just keep it rolling. Like, I don't even want to mess with it. You know?
That's a really cool way of looking at it, actually, and that's not something I'd ever considered. But you're absolutely right. Like, there's not many, if any at all, like misses in the raid, in general, in the raiding system in general. I think the only thing that I would be kind of interested in, this has been something I've wished for since Destiny 1, and they kind of did it with Prestige Callus, is more of a randomization factor. I know a lot of people, like at my team, we haven't ran it nearly as many as your team has, but we get to the point where we can pretty much do every raid on the hardest difficulty without even thinking about it. And
Right.
I think if you that comes from a pure understanding of mechanics. So if you throw a fight in there, sort of like Callus Prestige, where if you punch someone, you get teleported to a random location, or one random person does rather, that makes it a lot more hectic, and it makes it so you have to pay attention more. And I understand that might not be the best for replayability, but I think if implemented correctly, it would be a lot of fun. Obviously, I'm not a video game designer. I don't know the limitations on that. I just think
Yeah.
that it could be pretty fun. Something like the runner in Daughters, although that got to a point where if the wrong person got picked, we were just like jump off the edge till a regular
Right.
person got picked.
And I'm sure that's something Bungie thinks about as well. Is, well, for every good random thing, like maybe a Callus, you have a bad random thing with with King's Fall Daughters, where it's just like, oh well, Steve got the jump thing. He doesn't know how to jump. Everybody just wipe it. Like, I'm sure they don't want to run into those situations.
Right, right.
I agree with the random stuff. Even going back as far as Atheon, where before Atheon 1.0, it teleported the 3 furthest people away from Atheon, and then they changed it to 3 random people, which I thought was a good change because it forced people to learn the encounter. But the community hated that change. They liked very much knowing that they could plan who goes in at, whatever time Atheon would teleport people. So I found that kind of interesting. And that's maybe why they've laid off a little bit on the random stuff, or put it into prestige mode, which is a good idea because only really, really experienced people or really determined people are going to be going into prestige. And typically those kind of people are going to know the raid encounters a lot more than, guy who's going to be running Leviathan for, only the second or third time.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Like I said, it would affect the replayability, obviously, because it does require you to have a deeper understanding, and it would be harder to learn the raid initially too. We've gotten to the point where people are solving these raids. What was Leviathan done in like 7 hours or something?
I think it was like 5 hours. My team finished in 6. And
Okay.
we were, I don't even remember where we placed. 8.
It's just like one of those things, like the
it was
original.
like 5 hours.
The original Vault of Glass took over a day, right? It took a really long time.
It took 12 hours. My team was second. It took us, I think, a little over 12 hours. The team before us beat it, I think, an hour before or something. But sorry, continue. Yeah, go.
Oh, anyways, yeah. So one thing I would like to see is a little bit. I want the raids to be a little bit more difficult to find out, and I think the Leviathan did a really good job. Obviously, Vault of Glass was difficult because it was the first thing in Destiny, right? But when you look at things like whenever Prestige, King's Fall was released, or Heroic in Destiny 1, I mean, that team beat it in like an hour and 20 minutes. It was really fast. And I think,
Yeah.
I know that's only, that's a Prestige variant, so it's not going to take as long as a brand new raid. But I want to see a raid again that, it takes a really long time for people to figure out. I think that would be a lot of fun. Obviously, they'd have to find a way to do that without making the raid so difficult that there's no replay value there. So I think a randomization factor would be a really good way of doing that. But once again, I don't design video games. I don't work at a Bungie type corporation or anything like that. So I can just sit here and hope.
I think part of it is, well, I mean, first off, when Vault of Glass first came out, you didn't have nearly as many people running the raid, like on day one. You didn't have nearly as many people. So that's part of it. We also didn't know the game very well. That was part of it. We also didn't have as much experience, which I guess just is the exact same thing I just said. But we also have started to figure out the raid formula, right? We kind of know what Bungie's limitations are, so we can design our own expectations and our own strategies around that limitation and around that knowledge. So in order for Bungie to get to a spot where it does take us, 10, 12 hours to do it on the first day, I think you're probably just going to need a longer raid at this point, or you would need to come up with something so different compared to anything that we've had so far in order for people to just struggle on it. And I don't know if they are going to do that. It would be, I mean, it's very difficult to do that, first off. And I don't know if they want to drastically change up the formula so much that it just confuses the general audience. So it's a pretty tough undertaking, I think. But I would love to see it done, much like you. I would love to see it done. I would love to have one of those marathon days of just, 12 hours nonstop, just head bashing.
I can hear my fiance cringing in the other room over there. She hates, like, I always try to go for worlds first. Never been successful yet. We'll get there. But
Yeah.
she hates those days because we are just like locked up yelling for like 5 to 7 hours or whatever. So
It's the one day out of the year where you just get to go balls to the wall, just like it's the new thing. That's the reason I play video games, dude. That, like, just having those days where you sit down, you're with your team, you have no idea what's about to happen, just adrenaline's pumping. Oh,
exactly.
Games.
And there's 2 days in the Destiny universe when that stuff happens. It's launch day for the game and launch day for the raids. So yep. I totally get that. Even the launch day for Destiny 2, I skipped school. Don't tell anyone. And we went through. I had easy classes that semester. It's all right. But we went through the game just all day. It was great. And man, that's tough. Just like you, I really love that. There's nothing like it. And it's weird because after I always feel like terrible, but it's always worth it. It's like that was I don't know. It's so hard to put into words what's so fun about that. It is really just the not knowing what to expect. And the thing I love about raids is no matter how crazy your ideas are for the mechanics, like sometimes you might be right. They could do so many things with the puzzles in a raid. It's just a day full of brain teasers and skill tests and stuff. I love it. That's the perfect time for me. So I totally agree with that. And that's one reason I actually really like the raid layer system that they're going to start doing, because instead of once a year or twice a year or however many times, ideally now we'll get 3 per year, which will be pretty good. I'll see if they maintain the system because people weren't initially very happy when they announced it. I think Eater of Worlds showed that it's definitely a maintainable system. It's got, it wasn't the longest raid, and sure, it doesn't have the best rewards, but I think now that our concerns have been expressed, I think we will get raids at the same consistency, hopefully, but done much better. So that's in terms of rewards and replayability. So that's what I'm hoping for personally.
Anything's better than just here's a raid and now wait a year, and then here's another raid and now wait a year. Like, as long as they can, I understand it's not really feasible, at least for the Bungie team, to come up with a raid every single expansion, or full raid every single expansion. But this is certainly better than what we dealt with for the past 2 years. So I'll always take what I can get.
Agreed. Alrighty, that is going to be the end of my 10,000 subscriber special. I hope you guys did enjoy part 2. If you did miss part 1, where me and Datto rank all 6 of the raids, you can click the annotation on screen in a couple of seconds, or the link down in the description. But all around, I do want to thank you guys so much. I hope you did enjoy both parts. Sorry if at any point I sounded a little bit stuttery. As you can imagine, I was very, very nervous doing this. I wanted to bring you guys an awesome video, and obviously making content with one of my favorite content creators of all time, it's definitely very nerve-wracking. So I hope you guys still enjoyed the videos. I hope you enjoyed just the entire concept and whatnot. But really, I just want to thank you guys. You guys have absolutely killed it with the support on the channel this year. It's absolutely mind-blowing. So thank each and every one of you so much. If you do want to see part 2, you can click the respective annotation on screen to be taken to do it. If you're brand new to my channel, make sure to hit the giant version of my logo on screen to be subscribed for more awesome Destiny 2 videos and live streams. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will see you in my next video.